What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Bush coming at you solo today to talk about targets of mine in each round and players to avoid in each round. So what I'm going to do today basically is go through round by round, rounds 1 to 10 or so, and talk about guys that are my favorite targets within that round of ADP and guys that I'm avoiding currently at that ADP. And if you guys are new to fantasy, maybe this is the first time you're checking out the channel. If you are, I encourage you to hit the subscribe button, like the video, and comment any of your thoughts down below. But if you are new to fantasy, this is probably the best video that you guys can watch because it'll give you a good understanding of players you should be targeting and avoiding in each round of your fantasy draft, which is essentially like doing a mock draft, except you get a kind of a holistic view about which players are going to be available during that round of your draft. So if you guys enjoy, like I said, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. If you're new, we're going to hit the intro and then we're going to get right into this. Okay, so round 1, as I mentioned, you guys will see the ADP on the screen. As I'm going through, I'm kind of just going to leave the ADP there, talk about my favorite targets in round 1, players I'm avoiding in round 1, and I'm going to do that for pretty much every round. At the beginning of the rounds, I'm probably going to stick to a few guys, but in the towards the later rounds, I'm probably going to give more names just because there's a number of different directions you could go, and players to avoid and players to target kind of differ depending on opinion by those rounds. So we're going to start with round 1. As you guys can see the ADP on the screen, the biggest glaring obvious one is obviously you want to target Christian McCaffrey round 1 or Alvin Kamara round 1, but you need a high-end pick to do that. So I'm going to stick towards the later part of the round because if you don't have the 101, then you can't get Christian McCaffrey. So it's kind of useless to tell you that you should target Christian McCaffrey in round 1. So my biggest target in round 1 that you should be able to get pretty much at any point during that round is Saquon Barkley. And Saquon Barkley, we've kind of known for a while that he was going to be dealing with ACL reconstructive surgery because he is coming off of a torn ACL at the beginning of last season. But it sounds by all accounts now that Saquon will probably be back for week 1. And with Saquon back, this is a guy that we're talking about getting 100 plus targets, 300 carries, and he's a supreme physical talent at the position, great breakaway play ability. So Saquon Barkley, if you can get him anywhere outside the top 8 picks, is an absolute smash pick for me. I currently have him as my 4th overall player in half PPR leagues, 5th overall player in full PPR leagues. So if you're able to get him at any point after that, I think it's a slam dunk pick because I've talked about this before. A lot of people are going to call Saquon risky and they're going to say that they're avoiding because you don't win your fantasy league in the first round, but you certainly can lose it. I'm here to tell you, you can win your fantasy league in the first round. And picking Saquon Barkley would have been like picking the injury discount and the contract dispute discount of Dalvin Cook last year. So that's the way I view Saquon Barkley. He's a guy that I'm going to be targeting in the first round of all my fantasy drafts. And Davante Adams is kind of the same thing for me because a lot of people are going to smash running backs early in your drafts. Davante Adams is my 4th overall player in PPR leagues, 5th overall player in half PPR. And I'm willing to bet a lot of you guys are going to be able to get him at pick 8, pick 9, pick 10, pick 11 of your drafts. And to me, he's an absolute smash at that position. This is a guy that should be treated the same way that Antonio Brown was treated for all those years in Pittsburgh. He should be a top 3, top 4 pick because he is that big of an advantage at wide receiver. And on the players to avoid in round 1, Nick Chubb and Zeke Elliott are 2 guys that I'm not going to be drafting a whole lot of. Nick Chubb, because he's kind of splitting a backfield with Kareem Hunt. He doesn't get a lot of pass catching work. And I think this team is going to move towards more of a pass heavy approach. Nick Chubb is a phenomenal real life running back, but he's not the type of running back that will get you the elite fantasy numbers unless anything happens to Kareem Hunt. So he's a guy that I would rather get in round 2. And Zeke Elliott, I saw a downturn in his play last year. So that makes me a little bit nervous for my first round pick that I don't 100% believe in the talent of the player. Obviously the situation is great. He should catch a lot of passes, score a lot of touchdowns, but Zeke Elliott's inefficiencies do make me a little bit nervous. So I'm still willing to pick him in the first round, but currently at the 105 right now, that's a little high for me. So he might be a player that I avoid in the first round. So to the next round, round 2. You guys should be able to see the ADP on the screen right now. My biggest targets in round 2 are basically that big tier of running backs that I believe have that elite upside. Najee Harris, Jonathan Taylor, and Antonio Gibson. These guys have a chance to achieve 3 down roles. They're all excellent players. They'll have breakaway ability, and they all are tremendous receivers. So these are the guys that if I miss on that first round of running backs, let's say Davante Adams fell to me at pick 9 like it did in my home league, what I did in my home league was on the way back, I swung back and I got Antonio Gibson or Jonathan Taylor. or Najee Harris, whichever one falls to you, I think is the biggest target for me in round 2. These guys have legendary upside at the running back position, as we've referenced before with Pat Kerrane's article. So they are guys that I'm visibly and actively targeting in round 2 of drafts. And Stephon Diggs is also a guy that I'm going to be targeting in drafts as well, because he represents a big time advantage at the wide receiver position, and likewise for Darren Waller towards the end of the second round. And my biggest players to avoid in this round are clearly Patrick Mahomes. I just think it's too early for a quarterback. Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, all these other high-end quarterbacks, to me, I don't see that much of a difference between them because of what those other guys offer with their rushing ability. So Patrick Mahomes in the second round is too early for my blood. He's more of a guy that I would rather get in the mid to late third round. Right now, you have to pick him in the early second round portions of your draft, or even the mid to late second round portions of your draft. It's just too high for me. And then Joe Mixon, you guys know our thoughts on Joe Mixon. He is not a guy that I think has elite upside. I think he is destined to finish at that running back 10, running back 12 range. And when you're picking a running back in the first couple rounds, you need them to have that legendary upside, because if they don't, then you're risking a lot, because at wide receiver, at tight end, and at quarterback, you don't have to deal with the same injury risk at running back. So if Joe Mixon is not going to give you that legendary upside, he shouldn't be on your board in the first 2 rounds, because, and it's not specific to Joe Mixon, running backs get injured often, and running backs with Joe Mixon's level of volume are going to have a higher chance of getting injured. So I would much rather go with a DK Metcalf, and AJ Brown, a Justin Jefferson, Darren Waller, something like that, instead of a Joe Mixon. If you are at the back half of your draft, don't just draft Joe Mixon because you need a running back. You need to leave your second round with a running back. If the value isn't there on Joe Mixon, which to me, he needs to be a mid to late third round pick for me to pick him, then I'm going to surpass him for some of the wide receivers on the board. So in round 3, you guys can see the ADP on the screen. My biggest targets are the tight ends, right? If Darren Waller or George Kittle are on the board in round 3, they're pretty much an auto pick for me because they represent such an advantage at the position. Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, whatever receiver, Allen Robinson you guys like, I think should be a big time target of yours in round 3. The value at wide receiver in round 3 is very good. So if you have an early round 3 pick, anywhere from picks 1 to 6 in the third round, you should be able to get one of Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, or Allen Robinson. That is the order that I have those guys ranked. So that is how I would pick them. And then I also like, if you have a back end of the third round pick, let's say you missed out on those early third rounders that I talked about at wide receiver, I really like DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, and Mike Evans towards the end of the third round. So that's kind of the way I look at the third round. And then avoid in the third round, I wouldn't take a single quarterback in the third round that's not named Patrick Mahomes. And again, I probably wouldn't take him until the end of the third round. Any other quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, the third round is too early for me. I just think that you're passing up elite potential at wide receiver and at running back to take a quarterback at that position. So round 3 is too early for me on Josh Allen, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, or Dak Prescott. And then CEH, Chris Carson, and Robert Woods are also guys that I'm not currently drafting in round 3. I already talked about CEH, and Danny will talk about Chris Carson in terms of our biggest bust for fantasy this year. So I won't divulge too much information, but basically with CEH, I just don't believe in the player. I don't believe that the situation is good enough to propel him into an elite fantasy asset, because the Chiefs are a good team and they're a good offense, but they don't use their running backs like a feature back and like a feature bell cow. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire has not shown the talent and the ability to be used in that fashion. So he's a guy that I'm out on. Chris Carson, injury history, I think he's kind of a mediocre player, doesn't offer too much in the passing game. And like I said, I don't want to be drafting a mediocre to, RB2 level running back when I could be drafting wide receiver 1 potential with guys like Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, Mike Evans, and Allen Robinson. So at that position, I'm just much more likely to go wide receiver. And Robert Woods, I kind of take out of that conversation because to me, he's a low upside option, and I don't draft for floor in my fantasy drafts. Robert Woods has a bit more of a ceiling now that Matthew Stafford is there, but we've seen peak Robert Woods only be about wide receiver 12 to 15 in fantasy points per game. And I think Keenan Allen, CeeDee Lamb, Terry McLaurin, all those guys have that elite upside that Robert Woods does not have. So he's going to be a guy I probably surpass in drafts as well. Round 4, you guys can see the ADP on the screen. And basically, I would just sum this up by saying target wide receivers in round 4, specifically Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp, Julio Jones, and Tyler Lockett. That is the order that I have those guys ranked. So if you're wondering which wide receiver to target, Amari Cooper is the one I would target first, then Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp, Julio Jones, and Tyler Lockett. And again, if anybody from round 3 falls outside of Robert Woods, I'd probably take those guys as well. So wide receivers in general is basically what I'm looking to do in round 4. I also don't hate the quarterbacks in this range. If you wanted to take a Kyler Murray, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, if you want to go with a quarterback here, it probably needs to be towards the back end of the 4th round. But If those high-end wide receivers are off the board, then I'm okay going a quarterback here. And avoid, the players I would avoid in this range are any running back not named James Robinson is basically the way I'm going to put it, because I think James Robinson should be a pick in the third round, the late third round area, and he's currently going in the fourth round. So don't pick Josh Jacobs, don't pick Miles Sanders, and don't pick Chris Carson or Clyde Edwards-Helaire if they fall to you. I just personally don't like those running backs this year in fantasy. If you have a differing opinion, that's fine, but I will only pick James Robinson, David Montgomery, or DeAndre Swift in the fourth round if I am, missing out on some of this elite wide receiver talent. But as a general rule, in round 4, I would probably go wide receiver. That is probably the best case scenario for the value there. In round 5, you guys can see the ADP on the screen. You guys probably know what I'm about to say right now, but Brandon Ayuk is my number 1 target in round 5. He's my biggest breakout candidate at wide receiver. Danny sniped him from me in the breakout candidates video. So he is a guy that I'm going to be targeting in any round 5 that I'm in. TJ Hawkinson and Deontay Johnson are also guys that I really like in round 5. And again, any of the elite quarterbacks at this point in the draft in round 5, this is when I'm willing to pull the trigger on Lamar Jackson, on Kyler Murray, on Josh Allen. Maybe not yet Dak Prescott, but those other 3 guys I'm definitely willing to pull the trigger on. If some of the wide receivers like Ayuk and Deontay Johnson and TJ Hawkinson are off the board, I will pull the trigger on some of those quarterbacks. But the players I would avoid in round 5 are the second and third tier of quarterbacks, which to me, in my opinion, are Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and Justin Herbert. To me, it's just a bit too early on those guys. I would need to get those guys in round 6 and round 7. In round 5, it's just a bit too early. And again, more running backs. Do not draft running backs in what we call the running back dead zone. If you're unsure what the dead zone is, rounds 3 to 7 is the running back dead zone. We're historically not very good at drafting and predicting breakout running backs in rounds 3 to 7 going back the last couple of years. In 2015, 2020, you guys can see that the wide receiver position vastly outproduces the running back position in this range of the draft. And I would agree, looking at all these running backs, that I have a lot of question marks about their outlook, specifically with Mike Davis. They just signed Wayne Gallman, specifically with Kareem Hunt. He's splitting a backfield. Specifically with Myles Gaskin, we haven't seen that volume that we saw from Myles Gaskin last year. So I will surpass these guys for Deontay Johnson, Brandon Ayuk, TJ Hawkinson, DJ Moore, even too. Some of those wide receivers in that range I would rather have than those running backs. So round 6, you guys can see the ADP on the screen. Targets include T. Higgins, Chase Claypool, Jerry Jeudy, and Odell Beckham Jr. Again, more wide receivers in the running back dead zone is usually the smart way to go. I would say players to avoid in this area, Juju Smith-Schuster and all of the running backs not named Javonte Williams. So the one running back exception to the dead zone is usually rookie running back. If you can afford to draft a guy like Javonte Williams, let's say you drafted, in my home league, for example, I drafted Devontae Adams in the first round. I drafted Antonio Gibson in the second and DeAndre Swift in the third. So I already had 2 running backs and I filled out my wide receiver core rounds 4 and 5. I was okay drafting Javonte Williams in round 6 because he doesn't have to start for me right away. I'm okay to stash him on my bench, in my flex spot, whatever the case is. I think once this guy takes over the starting job, he is going to be phenomenal for fantasy. Maybe it's week 5, week 6, week 7 of the season, but I trust my ability to fill out depth, to fill out my flex spots until Javonte Williams gets to that point where I'm ready to put him in my lineup each and every week in my flex or in my RB2 slot. So he's a guy that I don't mind targeting in this range, but all the other running backs, Darrell Henderson, again, a lot of question marks about his workload with Sony Michel coming in. Raheem Mostert, a lot of questions about his workload, his durability with Trey Sermon being drafted to the 49ers, and Chase Edmonds. Again, this has been a career scat back when they brought in James Conner to presumably take away that goal line work from him. And we have a mobile quarterback in Kyler Murray. He's probably not going to throw the ball to him too much, and he's probably also going to take away a lot of the goal line work that Chase Edmonds would see. So running backs, again, just avoid him. Juju Smith-Schuster, again, he just stinks. He's terrible against man coverage. He's the 3rd target on that offense, in my opinion. So he is not a guy that I'm going to be drafting in this range of the draft. I would much rather draft these young ascending wide receivers like T. Higgins, Chase Claypool, Jerry Jeudy, and Odell Beckham Jr., who I think is going to get a solid target share as the number 1 target in that offense. I don't mind taking the shot on him at this point in the draft either as a bounce back candidate, quote unquote. So round 7, you guys can see the ADP on the screen. My biggest target in this round by far is Devontae Smith. If you guys watch my breakouts video, you know how high I am on Devontae Smith. I think he is going to be basically a light version of what Justin Jefferson was last year. Maybe he doesn't get 1,400 yards like Justin Jefferson, but I think he can be a 1,000-yard receiver from the very beginning, the very second he steps into the NFL. I believe in Devontae Smith's ability to create separation. He was the best separator in this class. I think he's going to be one of the offensive rookie of the year candidates, to be honest, this year. So as the number 1 target in the Eagles offense, he is my biggest target in round 7 of drafts. I also really like Robbie Anderson as a good target hog, PPR flex option as well in this round 7 area of the draft. But I think Devontae Smith presents more upside, which is why I would go with him. And then if you need a running back, I like Damian Harris. I like Trey Sermon. again, if you don't want to take a running back during that rounds 3 through 6 range or 3 through 7 range or so. Damian Harris and Trey Sermon are the first running backs that I'm willing to pick after that running back dead zone, because we start to see a little bit of a drop off in the wide receiver production after Devontae Smith and Robbie Anderson are off the board. Noah Fant, if you need a tight end, he is one of my favorite breakout candidates at tight end this year. I talked about him earlier today on our must draft tight ends video, so make sure you go check that out. And players to avoid in this area: Melvin Gordon, again, with the Javonte Williams side of things. I talked about the Javonte taking over that backfield. I don't think Melvin Gordon's going to be able to hold off Javonte Williams very long. And even if he can, I think it's a split backfield, and I don't trust Melvin Gordon's ability to stay efficient and stay healthy as an older running back. Tyler Boyd, a guy that I think was killed by the Jamar Chase selection. If T. Higgins is going to be fine from Jamar Chase being selected in the NFL draft, Tyler Boyd was a high target option that was very reliant on volume. And the fact that Chase and Higgins are going to be the main 2 targets in this offense makes me not really want anything to do with Tyler Boyd. I also have some question marks about Joe Burrow's health as well. Michael Thomas, again, he's not going to be playing the first 8 weeks of the season. So he is not a guy that I want to be spending a draft pick on and stashing on my bench. This is a totally different situation than Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams might be able to give you flex production right away. Michael Thomas won't even be on the field to begin the season, probably for the first 6-8 weeks of the season. So don't spend a draft pick on this guy. Just wait. If you want to take a shot on Michael Thomas, I would let somebody else draft him and then maybe trade for him week 5 if you're 4-1 or 5-0 in your fantasy league, and stash him for the playoffs at that point. Don't draft Michael Thomas in the 7th round and hold him for the full season. That is no bueno. So round 8, you guys can see the ADP on the screen. My biggest targets include Antonio Brown, Ryan Tannehill, Tom Brady, DJ Chark, and Will Fuller. So I would say the biggest target I have is Will Fuller. We saw what he did last year with Deshaun Watson, with his ability to win downfield and win as a number 1 receiver. With the departure of DeAndre Hopkins in Houston last year, Will Fuller became a number 1 wide receiver. And I don't think a lot of people are talking about it. I know a lot of people are going to talk about the fact that he was on PEDs or whatever. So with Will Fuller, yes, he had the suspension for PEDs last year, and he's going to miss the first game of the season right now, but he has a chance to be the number 1 target for Tua. I still believe in Tua as a talent. I still think that Will Fuller can help Tua become this quarterback that I saw from Tua at Alabama. So Fuller is a guy that I love getting as my wide receiver 4, my wide receiver 5. Stash him on my bench for that first week, and then he should be ready to go in my flex spot right away at the beginning of the season. I also mentioned Antonio Brown. Again, I think is going to be a great flex wide receiver. Not a guy that I necessarily think is going to outproduce Chris Godwin or Mike Evans, but in a great offense, they should be able to support 3 wide receivers in good matchups. DJ Chark is a guy that a lot of people have forgotten about because he kind of broke his finger before the season, but it's not a lower body injury, so I'm not concerned about him re-aggravating it or anything like that. And as I've talked about before, DJ Chark is a guy that was receiving the high-value targets for the Jacksonville offense the past couple of years. The red zone targets, the downfield targets, and the reason he was inconsistent was because he had bad quarterback play. Now he has Trevor Lawrence, who's this generational quarterback prospect. So if Trevor Lawrence can come in and play well right away, DJ Chark is getting those highly valuable targets in the Jacksonville offense from a big-armed quarterback down the field. So I think he could be a guy that really surprises people this year. And then with Tannehill and Brady, both of these guys are late-round quarterback targets for me. They're both the quarterbacks of great offenses. They have great weapons around them, and they should have high passing ceilings in terms of efficiency and in terms of volume. So the players I'm avoiding in this range of the draft are Deebo Samuel and Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts, I just think it's a little bit too early for him. I don't trust his ability to be a great quarterback. I like the rushing aspect of him. The passing side of Jalen Hurts makes me a little concerned in this 8th round area. And then Deebo Samuel, as I've talked about on numerous occasions, I think Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle are the guys that you want in this offense. Deebo Samuel is more of a gadget receiver. We haven't seen a lot of gadget receivers be great options for fantasy. Even with Curtis Samuel was a gadget receiver for a number of years. And then last year with Joe Brady, he was not a gadget receiver anymore. And then we finally saw him reach his full potential. So Deebo Samuel is not a guy that I'm overly high on. I know a lot of people like Deebo Samuel. He's a guy I'm personally avoiding, and I suggest you do the same as well. I've talked about it before with Brandon Ayuk, so I'm not going to rehash it all together here. So round 9, we'll speed through these last couple because it is towards the end of the round now. Laviska Shenault, Zach Moss, Corey Davis, and Jarvis Landry. It all kind of depends what you need at this point in the draft. If you're looking for ceiling, I would suggest going for a guy like Laviska Shenault. Could turn into a wide receiver 2-3 type for you in your fantasy roster. Zach Moss, again, if you skip over that rounds 3 to 6 running back range and you still need running back depth and running back talent, I think Zach Moss is a guy that is being a little bit slept on. He could have a David Montgomery-like second season in the NFL, in my opinion, because I don't really trust Devin Singletary's ability to command too much volume away from him. I think Zach Moss was the better prospect, the better player last year. and he provides more of a 3-down skill set than Devin Singletary does, as a little bit of a bigger running back as well. So Zach Moss is a guy, if you need a running back, I don't mind. And then Corey Davis, Jarvis Landry, I think both of these guys are going to be good for PPR leagues. Good target upside for both of them. So if you need some safety, if you're in a deeper league, let's say with 3 flex options, I think Corey Davis and Jarvis Landry can provide you a good weekly flex piece that you can throw in there and expect some wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 production out of them. Guys I'm avoiding in this range of the draft are Mike Gesicki, Joe Burrow, and Kenyon Drake. Mike Gesicki, I don't think he's very good. He's also got way more target competition than he had last year when he didn't produce. Joe Burrow doesn't seem like he's 100% healthy. It's just a little too high for me at this point. I would rather have Ryan Tannehill or Tom Brady or Matthew Stafford in that kind of range of the draft. And then Kenyon Drake, he's a backup running back to Josh Jacobs. So he's basically just a handcuff. I just think he's going a little too high for handcuff territory. I don't think he's going to have a huge role in the offense as long as Jacobs is healthy. Now, finally, to round 10, the final round of this video. My biggest targets in this round, I just crossed out J.K. Dobbins because he's only going here because he tore his ACL and his ADP is taking some time to correct itself. But my biggest targets in this part of the draft are Marvin Jones, Marquez Callaway, and Michael Pittman Jr. Again, a lot of question marks with those guys. Michael Pittman had a bit of a down rookie season. Marquez Callaway is a bit of an unknown, but he could be the number 1 target outside of Alvin Kamara for that Saints offense. So I think they're worth taking a shot on. I'm not relying on these guys necessarily, but I think they're good upside sleeper picks because of the target volume that's in front of them and the opportunity that's in front of them. Marvin Jones, I think, is a good option as well because with DJ Chark's injury, with Laviska Shenault being a bit unproven still, Marvin Jones is the true difference-making, proven veteran wide receiver. And with a rookie quarterback, I think there's a chance that Trevor Lawrence relies heavily on a guy like Marvin Jones at the beginning of the season, and he could have like a Robbie Anderson-like start to the season like we saw last year, a bit of an underrated free agent signing, goes to a new team and produces right away. I could definitely see Marvin Jones doing something like that. So I really like him as a target at this point in drafts. And then finally, players that I'm avoiding in this part of the draft, Curtis Samuel. The guy's missed basically the entire offseason in Washington because he's been dealing with lower body injuries, and that's been a problem for him in his career to begin with. So Curtis Samuel, not a guy that I'm really willing to take a shot on. Maybe if he falls to the 11th, 12th, 13th round, I'll take a shot on him, but I'm not overly excited about him. Devin Singletary, again, I don't think he's very good. I think he's good at making people miss, but that's about it. Doesn't present a lot as a receiver. He's not very good at that part of the game. So he's not a guy that I'm willing to take a huge shot on. I'd rather pick his teammate Zach Moss if I'm going to take a shot on this backfield. And then Mecole Hardman, again, if I'm going to take a Chiefs wide receiver that's not Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce, I'm going to take Demarcus Robinson in the 15th round of my drafts because Demarcus Robinson, we've seen in preseason usage, we've seen over the past couple of years, and the fact that they re-signed him tells me a lot too. Demarcus Robinson, to me, is going to be the wide receiver 2 in this offense in terms of snap share, in terms of running the most routes. So that stands to reason that he's probably going to take over Sammy Watkins' role, in my opinion, and be the number 2 wide receiver in this offense. Now, I don't think the wide receiver 2 in this offense is some great elite fantasy piece because Kelce and Hill demand so much attention, but Demarcus Robinson will have his weeks. He will have his boom weeks. He will have his big time plays that he's going to provide. And I think Mecole Hardman and him are kind of just going to go back and forth. So I will take the cheaper option instead of Mecole Hardman in the 10th round. I just don't think Mecole Hardman is a well-rounded player quite yet. I think he's still more of a special teamer, deep threat type of wide receiver. And I think I would rather take the shot on somebody else at this point. So that was a lot of mumbo jumbo, but if you guys did enjoy that, I hope you guys got some value from it. If you have a fantasy draft coming up, I think that'll really help you out to kind of get a sense of what players you should be targeting, what players you should be avoiding at the beginning portions of your draft. After you get outside of this 10th round range, honestly, just take whoever you want because sleepers and late round guys are a dime a dozen. So if you have a conviction about a player in round 11, round 12, round 13, just pull the trigger on them. You don't really need us to tell you who to pick at that point in the draft. We do have a video called Late Round Values if you want to check that out. So with that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed. Check out underdogfantasy.com using promo code FSE. You sign up using $10 and you'll get $25 on top of whatever you deposit. And you'll get both of our draft guides for free. So that's a great deal out there for you if you want to get access to our rankings, if you want to get access to our dynasty rankings, redraft rankings, half PPR, super flex, PPR, whatever you guys need. You also get our sleepers, busts, breakouts, draft strategy, articles, and all that and more on our website, thefantasystockexchange.com, just for using that underdog code FSE at sign up. So peace out, guys, and enjoy your Friday.
Why you need the money?